Welcome to the Property Podcast, the home of news and debate about building long-term wealth from property investment for beginners and experts alike. And now for your hosts. They may not be as cool as me, but they do know their property. It's Rob and Rob.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. It's episode 3. It's great to have you with us. I'm Rob Bentz, and joining me today is Rob Dix. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Rob. Good to be here. This is fast becoming my favourite part of the week. I really enjoy these little chats.
Yeah, it's good. We record these on a Monday morning as well, so it's always a positive setup for our weeks. I really enjoy it too. Rob, what have you got coming up this week?
Okay, so this week we're going to take a dive into our topic of the week, which is the 5 books that every property investor should read. So this is the real bookworm edition this week. And then if you can stick around through that, we'll be sharing our resource of the week, which is an essential tool that I use to stay organised and make my life dramatically easier. And I know that you do as well.
Yeah, definitely. If you stick around for that one, because if you're not using this tool, it might sound dramatic, but I think it could change your life. It really is that good. So make sure you listen out for that one towards the end. Just a quick mention that we're very early on in our podcast journey, and we'd really be delighted if you could leave us some iTunes reviews. There's a link on the website on how to get there. We're also going to be putting a video up as well, which will give you a brief guide on how to access it and give us a review. So we'd really, really be grateful if you could leave us a nice review. And of course, we will read them out as they come in. So if you could go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, preferably, and we'll certainly give you a mention on the show if you're kind enough to do that, so thank you.
Absolutely, very important. Okay, well, it's time for that part of the show where we ramble about ourselves for a bit, and this week I've spotted something that you've snuck into the show notes that you've kept very quiet, and I'm not talking about the launch of your new development, so do you want to tell us more about that?
No, slightly more importantly than my recent development launch, but only slightly. I got engaged this week. That was brilliant.
Congratulations.
So I've had a busy, slightly stressful and nervy week. Thank you. Yeah, completely caught her off guard, which is excellent. Left her stunned for words, and of course got the yes, otherwise it would be so I need to launch plenty more developments now to get that wedding paid for. Of course, launching that development kept me uber busy because you get so many questions, which is understandable and rightly so. So everybody has different questions. And going through the detail with everyone and letting them go away and doing their own research as well, which is always exciting when you launch new developments, but you struggle to get a little else done when that happens. So we launched last Thursday and it's Monday now, so just opening my emails up this morning and just working through and answering more questions, but it's all fun. How about yourself, Rob? What have you been up to?
Well, it sounds like you've been doing enough for the both of us, which is just as well, because I've had a really quiet week actually. I'm just back from Thailand recently. I haven't really adjusted to the 30-degree relative drop in temperature, so I've just been huddled up indoors, avoiding the snow and getting a double dose of spreadsheets, actually. I mean, what better to do than cuddle up with Excel on a snowy day? But I've been doing a financial review of just my personal finances and investments, but with the end of the tax year coming up. I feel like I should have some kind of amazing cloud-based system or something, but it's just spreadsheets all the way. And I've also been putting some bonus spreadsheets and videos together for the book that I've got coming out soon. It's a book that's targeted at beginners, and it's just got lots of big, broad information about getting started in property. But then I thought, for people who want more detailed, actionable stuff, I'll put together some of the examples of the spreadsheets that I use when I'm comparing different areas and different investments. And I'll put together some screencasts of the online research that I do. So I've kind of you've got the standard just the book package, but then you've also got a package that includes all this extra stuff. So I've been going back over all the spreadsheets that I use and the processes that I use when I'm in research mode, so I can kind of get that out of my head and put it into a form that makes sense to people. So it's been a geeky but fun week in that respect.
Wow, well, if that's a quiet week, I can't wait to pick you up. But I can say I've been fortunate enough to have a sneaky peek at the book that's coming out, and it's really good. So I know that beginners will get a lot from it, and it's good that you're putting this extra content in too, because then the more advanced investors can really benefit as well. So that sounds really good. I look forward to seeing some of that stuff.
Good stuff.
Okay, the news this week. There's a couple of stories, a couple of big ones. We obviously had the budget, and there's been a lot of coverage on Cyprus as well. Now, we record this, we're sort of a week behind you listening to this when we launch the podcast. So as we speak, Cyprus is still a country and still operating under the euro, but it's been quite dramatic, what's been going on there. Now, how does it relate to UK property? Well, people have been talking of more overseas investors looking at the UK, seeing the UK property as a safe haven. What's happened in Cyprus is really quite dramatic. Looking at shaving 10% off everybody's wealth or 10% of what's in the banks is really quite scary. And I can imagine there's a lot of nervous people over there, and it's really going to be interesting to see how things pan out and how they can come back from this. But a lot of people bought property in Cyprus as well, and I used to work within a Cyprus market at one point quite a few years back. I know it really well, and it's really horrible to see what's happening over there because it's such a great country and really, really nice people. So I really hope that comes good, because it would be such a shame to see the economy completely collapse. So I hope it does recover.
Yeah. But
it just shows you that you really, really... If you're going to invest abroad, you need to do 10 times the research. And now, I'm not saying research would ever have uncovered what's happened here, but you've got people say, should I invest in the UK or should I invest abroad? It's not really one's better than the other, but if you are going to invest abroad, make sure you know that market inside out before you do that.
Yeah, exactly. And as you alluded to, this particular incident might be beneficial for UK property because it's a safe store of value, and it means all the Russian investors in Cyprus might be kind of looking to double down on UK property because it's a safe asset class, and that is something that the UK has going for it. We can't take it for granted. It's not necessarily always going to be that way, but you do feel that there are certain safeguards in place and risks that you're not exposed to that you are if you're looking abroad. So like you say, I've always been scared of going abroad because of all these extra factors. There's no reason why you shouldn't invest abroad, but you just do have to know about all the different things that could affect it in addition to investing in the UK. But then I suppose even if you're investing in the UK, you just have to be prepared for these kind of black swan events where just something that you could completely never have planned for will just come and bite you.
It's such a good point, Rob. And actually, interestingly, and I never would have predicted this, but last year, a very large percentage of our revenue came from clients overseas because the point you've just made, they see the UK as a safe haven. The land registry has been around for a very, very long time. It's got a really secure legal system. And also, the weak pound, and it's been weak for 3 or 4 years now, is also attracting people to the UK because they get so much more for their money. So there's a lot of factors increasing that demand, and I think this Cyprus event will only encourage that further.
Yep, and so it's more like it's overseas investors and investors in general driving demand rather than first-time buyers, but then the measures that are in the budget designed to help first-time buyers might help that and get some activity happening at that end of the market. We'll see.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, the finer details have to come out there, but we're waiting to see what's said. But anything to encourage first-time buyers can only be a good thing. There's been schemes in the past and they've had limited effect, but we'll see what pans out. I really do hope it improves the situation because it is difficult for first-time buyers. And once you're on the property ladder, it then becomes a lot easier. Let's see what happens, but I'm sure it can only be a good thing. You know, the government is focusing on it, and that's what we want.
Yep, absolutely. All right, shall we dive into our topic of the week then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, first of all, the topic is the 5 books that every property investor should read, and I think that the listeners should know how hard it was for us to get this down to 5. I mean, this could have been 55 books every investor should read because we are both total bookworms. But eventually we thought, okay, well, let's get this down to if we were talking to a friend and we wanted to give them just the absolute essentials, what would be the 5 books we would pick? And we've gone for a mix of books about property and more kind of general, I suppose, self-help books, personal development books, for want of a better word, because the nuts and bolts of property are important, and you can pick up great stuff through books in the same way as you can from networking and online and everything else, and experience, of course. But the mindset stuff is essential because that underpins absolutely everything. So we've got a bit of a mix going on there. Okay, so the first book is one that we've talked about before. It's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it's as I was writing it, I was like, grown Rich Dad, Poor Dad again. But it is that much of an essential book. It doesn't mention property all that much. It kind of gets mentioned at the end in a really kind of specific particular way of financing deals in the States, which I'm pretty sure doesn't work anymore and has never been relevant over here. But for some reason, even though property barely got mentioned, it's just a real seminal book for so many investors. So many people have mentioned to me that that's the book that got them started, because it's just such a simple story, much like The Richest Man in Babylon that you mentioned last week. It's a simple story that opens your eyes to the fact that you need to be building up assets, spending less than you earn, and getting out of the mindset of being an employee. And it's just a wake up call, I think. It kind of makes you realize that being in a job is not going to get you to where you want to be, especially more relevant now than ever in the UK with the pensions crisis. And you've got to start thinking like the rich dad, I suppose, and building up your asset base to secure your own financial future. It's so simple, but so powerful.
It really, really is. That probably won't be the last time we talk about Rich Dad Poor Dad either. We could do a whole episode on the book because it's so important as a starting place for investing. The great thing about the book is it's really simple, as you said, Rob. It's a really simple story, simple read. But the amount of people who then after reading it have a eureka moment or a light bulb moment, or you hear terms like it changed my life, it really can have that dramatic effect on people. I think it's such a good book, it's a good starting place, and the great thing the author's done there, Robert Kiyosaki, is he's motivated so many people into securing their own financial futures, which is such a fantastic thing. You know, he should be really proud of what he's achieved there. Some people are critical of the book. I really don't understand that because, yes, he's gone on to spawn a lot of other things, but actually, if you come back to this original book, a brilliant piece of work, and it's done a lot of good for property investors and people, you know, generally who read it. They may use other vehicles, but it seems to motivate people into property. We've actually produced you mentioned that it doesn't actually talk about property that much in the book, which is true. So one of the things we've done at R&P Property is put a guide together, which is to accompany the book, which talks about the lessons you can learn and how to adapt them to property investment. That guide's free and we'll link to it in the show notes. It's really worth having a look at that as well because that will really accompany the book and help you get the most out of it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so our second book, Successful Property Letting. Now, this is a book which is really an A to Z of property investment. It's got all the details there to get going. It's a really good overview of property investment. It's not one of those books that like Rich Dad Poor Dad, that you're going to go, it's changed my life. But it's really solid. There's so much good content there, it's hard to pick fault with it. From how to manage tenants, how to find good tenants, refurbishing property if that's what you want to do, buying property, finding the right properties. It's got loads of stuff in there. It's really broad. It's got some really good solid content. And if you're thinking about property investment, you know, it's one of the books that you should definitely be picking up.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you say, I think solid is the word. It's just reliable. It covers everything that you could realistically need to know as a beginner. And I've got a copy that I flip through from time to time just to remind myself about sort of certain fundamental things that you can forget about all too easily when you get too deep into things. But as a starting point, it's realistic as well. It doesn't kind of give you big, ridiculous returns that you're never actually going to achieve. And it tells you about the downsides and the things that you need to watch out for without being scaremongering about it. So I think if you're going to take one kind of nuts and bolts how-to property book, that would be the one for me. Okay, well, going from the nuts and bolts of property to more of a big picture mindset kind of book, the next one we've picked out is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And we're going to be linking to all these in the show notes, by the way, if you can't remember what we're talking about. The 4-Hour Workweek came out in 2006, and it was kind of a really amazing thing for me because the gist of it is Tim Ferriss, the author, set up his life in such a way that he had a company that was selling supplements online, and he set up his life so he had a virtual assistant taking care of everything. All the actual products were drop shipped. He set up systems, and so everything could be done without him. And he disappeared off to somewhere else in the world and checked his emails once every few days to see if anything had gone wrong. And that was it. And the fact that it came out in 2006, it was kind of when this was just on the cusp. It's like technology had kind of just got to the point where you had reliable Wi-Fi all over the world and you had Skype and everyone was on email and all that kind of thing. And he was one of the first people to make you realize that this kind of lifestyle is possible. And people kind of tell me I must be living the 4-hour workweek lifestyle because I'm always on the move. And I tell them that's very much not the case. And it's like 4 hours on a Sunday and 12 hours every other day. But the principle is that you can just go and basically, if you set up the systems correctly and you take the right attitude towards things, then you can set your life up in such a way that you don't have to be hands-on and you don't have to be tied to a specific location. Although the tools have kind of changed over the last 6 years since he wrote it, the principles are exactly the same. He talks a lot about goal setting, which is something we go on about a lot. He talks about outsourcing, and that's something that you can make use of, whether you're outsourcing to the Philippines, like he talks about, or whether you're just kind of systemizing part of your business in the UK and giving it to an employee to do. And he talks about the 80-20 rule, which is the Pareto principle, where 20% of things take up 80% of your time. And if you just focus on the right 20%, then you can forget almost everything else and save yourself a lot of work. So this book has absolutely nothing to do with property, but I think the lessons from it, even if you don't aspire to go and work for 4 hours a week on a beach somewhere, you can still make use of them in your property business.
Okay, I absolutely agree, Rob. The 4-Hour Workweek is such an important book. Yes, it doesn't talk about property investments, but the lessons you learn from there absolutely apply. It's about making sure you don't become a slave to your property portfolio by setting up the right systems, being efficient with your time, and making sure that, property doesn't become another job, on which it can become. And I think we'll talk about this next week and we'll come on to that shortly. But property investment can be a job if you choose it to be. But by setting up the right systems, managing your time effectively, the 4-Hour Workweek will really, really help you do that. If I had to only read 3 business books again for the rest of my life, 4-Hour Workweek would be one of them. And property investment should be viewed as a business, like we said last week.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm as you alluded to, I will say what next week's episode is going to be about shortly, but I'm very excited about that one. I think we can get very geeky into that.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to it. The next book, Magic of Thinking Big. Again, this isn't a property book, but the lessons you will learn are so important. Property investors generally are optimists. You don't invest in property if you think everything's going to crash and burn. The Magic of Thinking Big really helps you with goal setting and putting goals together. It's something we've mentioned before, but goal setting is one of the first things you should be doing when you get into property investment. Where are you trying to get to? What are you trying to achieve? And then the great thing about this book is it helps you set those goals. It helps you think big, and it allows you to dream a little, but realistically dream. It's such a good book, and it'll apply to so many aspects of your life. But if you're a property investor, The Magic of Thinking Big is a really good book, and it's one you should be reading.
Yeah, I must admit it's not one that I've actually read. It's been on my Amazon wish list for ages, but I never really got around to reading it. And when you put it on the list for this week, I sort of had a little flip through some notes. I didn't realize that it was written about 50 years ago or something. So it's not just kind of one of these modern books with just like one brief idea. He goes into a lot of detail about how to apply this stuff, and it's lessons which have endured for a long time, and they seem to be just as relevant now as they ever have been.
A bit like How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not on the list, but that's a classic, and probably another book you could add to this list. But as you said, we've held ourselves back here. So
yeah,
the next book is one that I've not read, Rob, but you put on the list. So I'm quite keen to hear about this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's by Paul Ribbons, and it's called Hustle Your Way to Property Success. And it's one that something about the way it was presented kind of alienated me to start with. It just didn't appeal to me for some way. I guess maybe because Paul is a trader, and he's all about sort of flipping and buying at auction and putting things back into auction, and it just never really resonated with me because I'm a very boring buy and hold kind of guy. But people kept telling me that I should read it, and so I did, and I loved it. And then I got Paul as a guest on my other podcast at the end of last year to talk about it some more. And what I really like about it is, even if you aren't going to apply his approach at all, his approach is about buying kind of distressed properties at a really low price, then sometimes systematically distressing them more to make them look more like a kind of property that like a fixer-upper that an investor might want, putting it back into auction and selling it for more than he bought it for. And even if that's completely alien to you, the lesson that really comes through from the book is how much property is a people business. And it's not just about the deal and the configuration of the bedrooms and how you do a refurb or anything else. It's all about people. And so he talks about how he manages to negotiate off-market deals with vendors in a way that kind of gets the best result for them and the best result from him. And the most interesting section, I think, is about when he talks about how to negotiate with estate agents. And he used to be an estate agent himself, so he understands how they think and how they operate. And it's not about taking a negative view towards agents and trying to beat them up, but kind of making them part of a collaborative process in a way that kind of guides them towards helping you get you what they want, but also getting a good result from them. And it's kind of hard to describe because there's a lot of detailed stuff in there. But the main message is the extent to which property is all about people, and knowing how to relate to people, how to understand incentives, and some persuasion tactics and everything else. That's what will really make the difference in your property investing career, rather than knowing the ins and outs of what type of boiler you should be installing. But then at the same time, you should be using all these powers of persuasion and everything in a way that helps get a good result for everyone and doesn't screw anyone over for your own ends. So I think that's a really poor summary, but I would recommend reading it because I think you can. It's a great story. He's had an interesting life, and it also has lots of great tips that will come in useful whatever strategy you're applying.
I think that was I've not read the book, but it sounds like a great description. You've certainly captured my interest. I think the reason why because I see all the property books, and the reason why I've probably never picked it up is because his strategy is the opposite end of my strategy is. We have very similar philosophies of, buying, holding, investing for the long term. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like there's some really good, solid lessons and tips that can be picked up there. So I'll definitely be at the end of this going out and buying that one, because if it's managed to get in your top 5, then I'm picking it up and having a read.
Good stuff. Well, we said we'd got it down to 5, but we couldn't help but sneaking in a couple of honourable mentions as well, could we? So there's 2 more that we are going to sneak into the show notes and just mention very quickly now. The one that I chose was Work the System by Sam Carpenter. Again, it's a bit of a preview of next week's episode. It's about setting up systems, and again in a 4-hour work week kind of way, setting up systems so that you haven't just got yourself a job, you build a business, and that business is made up of systems that can be executed by anyone. You might have heard of the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and it's kind of a more accessible, updated version of that. But I won't say any more because this isn't meant to be on the list, but Work the System is the one I've chosen for an honourable mention.
Honourable mention is The Ultimate Sales Machine. The title is really cheesy, but don't let that put you off, because it is a really, really good book. It's a business book again. It's not a property book, but there's so many lessons that you can learn on how to improve your business. Some of it you won't be able to apply to property at all, but the points that you can will make a big, big difference. And if you have a business, well, then stop listening to this podcast and go and buy it, because that probably is in my top 3 as well. Business books. It is so good. It was such a game changer when I picked that book up. Probably the most notes I've ever put down after reading a book. Really, that's the truth. So much gold in there. But if you're a business owner or you're self-employed, that's a must buy.
Yeah, absolutely huge. Again, I just took so many notes. I felt like I was just copying out the whole book at times. It's absolutely brilliant. And speaking of notes, that kind of leads us on to our resource of the week.
We love this resource of the week. So we built it up at the start, but rightly so, because it is such a good resource and it's free. It's called Evernote. And if you've not used it, go to Google now and find it. We'll put it in the show notes, of course. Evernote is the easiest way to describe it. It's like an online scrapbook. Okay, now that's probably not doing it justice, but that's the easiest way to describe it. You can organize your whole life through Evernote. There's everything you can do there. For me personally, I have property notebooks. I have business notebooks. I have travel notebooks. There's so much in there. If you see anything that you like on Evernote, they've got another little app that you can use to go with it called Clipper. And all you do is when you're on a website or an article that is useful and relates to something you want to keep for your scrapbook, you just click a button, put it down in which notebook you want it to live in, and then you can read it when you want to come back to it at any point. I find I've got a notebook that just says catch up. So if I'm busy with work and I see something that captures my attention that I don't want to give it my time now, I'll just put it in there, and then later on when I've got a bit of downtime, I'll go back and read it and put it in whichever notebooks it's meant to be in. But such a great tool. I can't, for free, it's unbelievable. I'd happily pay a big chunk of money for this app, but I'm not going to obviously ring them up and tell them that. But it's such a good app. You really need to go and have a look at it if you're not using it.
Yeah, it is just huge. It sounds so simple, and it is. I think the power is the different. There's so much flexibility in how you organize stuff, so you can set out all your information in a way that makes sense to you. And also that it's so searchable. And the best part, what I use it for a lot, is when you add photos to it or scans or whatever else, it uses OCR, optical character recognition, to identify and extract the text from photos and scans and stuff. So what that means is that you can, what I use it for is if I get documents, I don't actually have a scanner. I just take a picture of the document on my phone, send that to Evernote, and then I can just use Evernote's search function to find any word from in that document. So if I need to know when, just something stupid like when a gas safety certificate is expiring or something, I can just do a search in Evernote for gas, and it'll pull up a document that's got that word. Well, it pulls up a photo that's got that word embedded in the middle of it somewhere. And it's just terrifying how accurate it is and how it does it. So basically, it just means because the search is so good, anything in your life, you can just shove it in there, and then you'll be able to pull it up when you need it. And you can go so deep with Evernote. I think at some point I'll have to do some videos that show how I use it, because I just do some crazy stuff with it.
Rob, it sounds like you use it on another level to me. Some really good tips there. I mean, it is a game changer. Don't just play around with it. Get stuck into it. Give it the time it deserves. Put some time aside to start implementing it into your life. Make sure it's on your desktop. Use the Clipper app as well, and take a look. It really is worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think hopefully everyone else has enjoyed this episode. I know that we have, because we've got to talk about one of our favourite pieces of software and our favourite books, which has been brilliant. But if you have enjoyed it, again, please go over to iTunes and leave us a review. It's really important in helping us to get found by more people. And so our time that we invest in this is worthwhile. You can find the link to iTunes over on our website, which is thepropertypodcast.com. And while you're there, you can also join our mailing list. Just stick in your email address. We won't bother you with anything else, but we'll just send you an email every week when a new episode goes up to make sure you don't miss it. And I think that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about the perennial debate. Are you an investor or are you a landlord? Are they different things? Can they be different things? Can you be one without the other? We've both got kind of slightly... I think we feel the same about it deep down, but we've both got different approaches to the whole thing. So I think that's going to be a really interesting episode.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. Make sure you come back for that one, because you're right, Rob. We have slightly different ways we operate our property portfolios. So it's going to be interesting. People get quite passionate about this subject. If you go into some of the property forums, Property Tribes being a prime example. Now, before we start, I'm not going to say this again next week. It's not to say one is right and one is wrong. It's a choice, but it's going to be interesting to discuss that choice. So I'm really looking forward to next week's episode.
Yeah, me too. All right, good stuff, Rob. We'll see you at the same time next week.
Super. Thanks, Rob.
Right, cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Property Podcast. Don't forget to check out the show notes and join the mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.